I found my mother's last warning in a cedar recipe box that my nephew had thrown in the trash. The note said, "Do not trust them. Save yourself." That warning was the reason I eventually sat in a bank office while my own nephew and his girlfriend got arrested for stealing my pressure washing business out from under me and selling it for $560,000. By the end of it, he was scrubbing dumpster pads in a wetsuit that said, "Striped my pension," and every invoice he printed carried the docket number of his own fraud conviction. This is the story of how my own nephew tried to erase me and how my mother's last gift made sure he could not. For 27 years, I drove the number 214 school bus route for the county school district. It was a 23-mile loop through the north side, starting at the Pine Hollow Depot at 5:40 in the morning and ending at the last stop on Clear Creek Road at 4:15 in the afternoon. I knew every pothole, every rain-slicked curve, every dog that chased the bus on Tuesdays, and every kid who needed an extra minute at the stop. I kept a logbook under the dash with the mileage, the diesel fuel gallons, the number of students each day, and a small spiral pad for incident reports. That logbook habit saved me later, but I did not know it yet. I retired at 54 with $127,000 in my pension account, a lump sum payout after almost 3 decades of union dues, safe driving awards, and a perfect attendance record that the district framed and hung in the break room. I did not buy the little condo in Florida my coworkers talked about. I did not buy a boat. I bought 3 used pressure washing rigs instead. There was a 4,000 psi cold water unit with a 13-horsepower Honda engine, a 3,500 psi hot water unit with a diesel burner for grease and gum, and a small 2,000 psi electric machine for detail work on storefronts and sidewalks. I also bought a parking lot striping route with 17 commercial contracts, including 4 grocery store lots, 3 medical clinics, 2 church parking lots, and 8 office buildings. The route included a Titan line striper, 2 stencil kits for handicap symbols, and enough traffic paint in 5-gallon buckets to stripe half the county. I did all of it with my nephew Travis, because his mother died when he was a teenager, and I had raised him like a son. He was the family golden boy, the one everybody forgave, and I loved him. My late husband, a quiet locksmith who could read a room by the way a key turned, once told me that a contract is only as good as the person holding the other pen. I remembered that line every day after the business started. I had Travis sign a 50-50 partnership agreement, notarized at a shipping store next to a nail salon, and I added a notarized addendum that the company would provide free driveway sealing for the widows on my old bus route for as long as the business operated, every spring, with me doing the work myself. Travis said his girlfriend Brittany had an accounting certificate and could handle the registered agent paperwork. I said fine. That was my first mistake. Then my mother died. It happened on a Tuesday morning in October, fast and quiet. I got the call at 6:40 a.m. from the hospice nurse. My mother had been in home hospice for 8 days, and I had been staying in her guest room on the weekends. The end came sooner than the nurses predicted, the way it sometimes does when a person decides they are done. I drove to her house with my hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, the same way I had driven my bus for 27 years. I parked in the driveway next to the rose bushes she had pruned every spring, and I sat by her bed for an hour before the funeral home came. She was 81, and she had been sharp as a razor until the last week, when she started sleeping more and talking less. Her house smelled like her, rose soap and cold coffee and the faint metallic tang of the old radiators. I held her hand, and I did not cry yet, because I was still in the practical mode I learned from driving a bus full of children, the mode where you handle the emergency first and feel it later. By Wednesday afternoon, Travis and Brittany were standing in my mother's living room with a clipboard, a label maker, and a spreadsheet on a tablet. The vultures did not even wait for the obituary to run. Brittany's first words to me were not, "I'm sorry for your loss." They were, "We need to inventory the Waterford before the estate sale." Travis hugged me with one arm and held his phone in the other hand, texting. He told me not to worry about anything, that he and Brittany would manage the estate, manage the business, manage me. My mother's house still smelled like her, and I stood there in my funeral dress watching them pull her jewelry box apart and assign dollar values to her life. They moved through the china cabinet, the silverware, the photo albums, the little porcelain birds she collected. Travis picked up a small cedar recipe box from the kitchen counter, flipped it open, and said, "That's just old recipe cards, junk." Brittany said, "Donate it or toss it. We need the house cleared by Friday." Travis dropped it into a black trash bag with a wet thud. I waited until they went outside to argue about the cost of a dumpster, and I pulled that box out of the trash and hid it in my overnight bag. I told myself it was just my mother's recipes and I wanted them. I was wrong. That night, in my mother's guest room, after the funeral home had taken her away and the house was too quiet, I unzipped the overnight bag and opened the cedar box. The lid creaked. Inside were maybe 60 index cards, handwritten in my mother's cursive, recipes for banana bread, chicken tetrazzini, 7-layer bars, corn chowder. I thumbed through them, and each one had a little note in the margin, like "Use the good vanilla" or "Bill likes extra onion." Underneath the recipes at the bottom of the box, there was a small memo pad with a black cover, the kind banks used to give away. I flipped to the last page. In my mother's shaky handwriting, the pen pressed hard enough to leave grooves in the paper, she had written one line: "Do not trust them, save yourself." I sat there with the memo pad in my hands, and I could hear her voice in my head, the way she said my name when she was serious. I read it 4 times. The fog of grief burned off in about 3 seconds, and for the first time in months, my mind was clear. My mother knew something. She had seen something in Travis and Brittany that I had been too blind or too loyal to see, and she had waited to show me until she was gone. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe family should never be allowed to steal your future just because they share your blood. The next day, Travis and Brittany sat me down at my mother's kitchen table. They had printed a durable power of attorney form from a legal website, and they had already filled in their own names as my agents. Travis slid it across the table and said, "Auntie, you're in no shape to handle the business or the estate. Let us take care of everything. You can move into our guest room. Brittany will handle the books. I'll keep the rigs running. All you have to do is sign." Brittany smiled and slid a second form across the table, a healthcare proxy, and said, "It's for your protection. You've been through a trauma. You shouldn't have to make big decisions." I looked at those forms and I saw my mother's handwriting in my mind. I also saw the date on the power of attorney, already notarized with a stamp that looked identical to the one at the shipping store. I played weak. I let my hand tremble. I said, "I don't know, honey. I'm so tired. I can't think straight. My head is foggy." I told them I needed a few days, maybe a week, to process everything. I did not sign anything. I let them believe I was a confused old woman who had just buried her mother and lost her spine. The truth was, I had been driving a 40-foot bus through ice storms for almost 3 decades. I knew how to keep my hands steady when everything around me was sliding. They moved me into their house that same week, a beige McMansion in a subdivision where every lawn looked like AstroTurf, and every garage door had the same faux carriage handles. They gave me a guest room at the end of the hall, a room with no lock on the door and a window that faced the air conditioning unit. Travis also installed 2 small pinhole cameras in the living room and kitchen, the kind that look like smoke detectors and feed a phone app. He said they were for security. I knew they were for watching me. I learned the blind spots within a day, the corner by the pantry, the hallway outside the laundry room, the narrow strip between the sofa and the wall. I packed a small bag with my clothes, my toothbrush, and my mother's cedar box. I also packed a few things I had kept from my old life. A tire thumper, a small maglite, and the lockpick set my husband had given me on our 10th anniversary. It was a leather roll the size of a cigarette pack with 5 tension wrenches, 2 rakes, a half diamond, and a short hook, all spring steel and worn smooth from his hands. I had not used it in years, but my hands remembered. I also packed a small sewing kit with tweezers and a magnifying glass because I had a feeling I would need to read small print. I let Travis add me to their phone plan and cancel my own because it meant I could see the bill and the call logs. I let Brittany drive me to the bank to update my signature card, but I told the teller I had forgotten my glasses and would come back another day. I played the part of a woman in a fog. At first, I was the perfect house guest. I folded laundry, I swept the garage, I made casseroles, and I listened. I learned the rhythm of the house. Travis left at 8:15 in the morning and came home after dark, but he also took calls at 2 in the morning, whispering things like "the note is coming due," and "I told you, it's under Brittany's LLC, not mine." I heard him say balloon payment and factor the invoices through the heating vent in the hall. Brittany bought a new Lexus, then a $6,000 sofa, then boxes from designer stores that she hid in the garage. When I asked how the business was doing, Travis said, "Margins are thin, Auntie. Fuel costs are killing us. Insurance went up again." But I knew the business was profitable. I had seen the contracts. I had sealed driveways for the widows on my route and charged commercial clients a fair rate for wrist striping and seal coating. I could do a square foot cost estimate in my head, and I knew exactly how much money came in every month. So I started doing what I did on the bus for 27 years, watching without looking like I was watching, remembering every detail, every whispered argument, every time Travis hung up the phone and kicked the baseboard. I also started keeping a small spiral notebook hidden inside a folded towel in the linen closet. I used the same shorthand I had learned from writing bus incident reports, a system of abbreviations and symbols that only I could read. Every time Travis mentioned a dollar amount or a date, every time Brittany snapped at him about a credit card bill, every time a courier dropped a certified letter on the porch, I wrote it down. The breakthrough came when the garbage disposal jammed. Brittany stood in the kitchen with a wooden spoon and looked at the sink like it was a live grenade. Travis said he would call a plumber, $200 an hour. I said, "Let me look at it." I went to the garage, found a hex wrench, and I fixed it in 8 minutes. I knew how to use the hex key in the center of the disposal's flywheel to break the jam, and I knew how to reset the thermal overload button on the bottom of the unit. After that, they started asking me to fix things around the house. A loose door hinge, a dripping faucet, a running toilet, a garage door sensor that kept reversing. I did the work. It gave me a reason to be in every room. It also showed me where they kept spare keys, where the file folders were stacked, and how often they ignored their own mail. They thought I was a useful old woman. They forgot that I had spent 27 years maintaining a bus route in a district where if your air brakes failed, you had to know how to fix them on the side of the road. I noticed the office door had a filing cabinet, a 2-drawer metal cabinet with a cheap wafer cam lock on the top drawer. I also noticed shredded documents in the recycling bin, thin strips of paper from a cross-cut shredder. I started taking those strips out at night and taping them back together on the floor of my room with clear packing tape and a headlamp. The shredder cut in 1/4 inch by 1.5 inch strips, and the text was small, but I had patience. I sorted the strips by the color of the paper, then by the line spacing, then by the tier patterns. It took me a week, but I pieced together enough to see bank account numbers, a business name I did not recognize, and the words assignment of contract over and over. I also saw the letters Bright Path Exterior Solutions, LLC, printed on a document from the Nevada Secretary of State. I had never heard of Bright Path. I had never signed anything with that name. One afternoon, while Travis and Brittany were at a car dealership negotiating a trade-in on the Lexus, I went into the office. The filing cabinet was locked, but it was a cheap lock, a wafer cam lock with 5 wafers, the kind you can buy at an office supply store for $8. My husband's pick set opened it in under 40 seconds. I used a half-diamond pick and a tension wrench, the same way he taught me, lifting each wafer until I felt the cylinder turn. Inside, I found the truth. The business was not in my name. It had been registered under Brittany's name 3 months after I signed the original partnership agreement. The parking lot striping route, the 17 commercial contracts, the 3 pressure washing rigs, all of it had been transferred to an LLC called Bright Path Exterior Solutions, and the sole member was Brittany. I found the sale documents. Travis had sold the contracts to a competitor for $560,000. My signature was on the sale documents, but it was a forgery, a traced copy that looked almost right but not quite. The notary stamp was fake, a $20 stamp from an online store. And there, clipped to the back of the file, was a copy of a check made out to me for $3,800 with the memo line that said soap. That was the check Travis had handed me 2 months earlier, telling me it was my share of the quarterly profits. He had even folded it in a thank you card with a picture of a pressure washer on the front. I had deposited it without a second thought. I took photos of everything with my phone, page by page, and I put the files back exactly the way I found them, using a sticky note to mark the order before I pulled them. I wiped the lock with a cloth and left the office. That night, I sat on the floor of my guest room and went through my old voicemails. I had thousands of them because I never deleted anything, a habit from my bus driving days when I saved every message from the depot in case of a dispute. And then I found it. A voicemail from Travis, left at 11:42 on a Saturday night, the same night he had handed me the soap check. It was a pocket dial. He had been talking to Brittany, and his phone had called me by accident. The message was 3 minutes and 28 seconds long. I heard his voice, slurry and smug, saying, "The old bat thinks it's soap money. I registered everything under your name, sold the route for $560. She'll get nothing. The check's a placebo. By the time she figures it out, the LLC will be gone and will be in Costa Rica." I listened to it 4 times. Then I saved it to 3 different cloud accounts and a hard drive I had hidden in my mother's recipe box. I also made a copy on a micro SD card and taped it inside the barrel of an old ballpoint pen in my bag. I was not taking chances. The next piece of the puzzle came from my mother's lawyer, a man named Mr. Calloway who had handled her estate for 20 years. He called me on a Thursday and asked me to come to his office. He said my mother had left something important. When I got there, he handed me a copy of her trust. My mother had set up a revocable trust 5 years earlier, and she had named me as the co-trustee with a specific provision. The provision said that no asset of the trust, including her house, her savings, and a small brokerage account, could be sold, transferred, or encumbered without my physical presence and my notarized signature. Not just my signature, my physical presence. The bank had my photograph on file and a copy of my driver's license. They also had a set of identity verification questions based on my bus route, the number 214, my mother's middle name, and the street where I grew up. My mother had also left a notarized letter dated 2 years before she died. It said, "If anything happens to me, do not trust Travis. He stole from me once. He will steal from you. The trust is your shield." Mr. Calloway told me that 2 years earlier, Travis had taken $4,000 from my mother's checking account by forging a check. My mother caught him, closed the account, and changed the trust. She had seen this coming. She had built a dead man's switch into her own estate, and the switch was me. She had already turned the lock before she died. I took that letter to the bank where the business account had been held, and I met with a man named Mr. Delgado, a fraud investigator in the bank's compliance department. He was a short man with thick glasses and a voice like a ledger. He pulled up the signatures on the sale documents and compared them to my known signature on file. He used a forensic document examiner over a video call, and the examiner magnified the loops and pressure points, then said, "This is a forgery. The notary stamp is invalid." The wire transfer records show the proceeds went to an account in Brittany's name, then to a shell company in Belize. Mr. Delgado told me the bank had already filed a suspicious activity report with FinCEN the moment the wire hit, because the account was only 6 weeks old and the sale contract listed me as the seller, but the wire beneficiary was an LLC with no operating history. He asked me if I would help gather final proof. He gave me a small USB device, no bigger than a stick of gum, and he said, "If you can plug this into his laptop for 30 seconds, it will copy the relevant files without leaving a trace. The device will pull the documents folder and the Outlook PSD file, but it will not open anything or modify the access times." He also gave me a secure email address he had set up through the bank's encrypted portal and told me to use a library computer if I ever needed to send him anything, never the house Wi-Fi. I told him I could do it. I waited until the following Tuesday, when Travis and Brittany went to a spin class. I went into the office, plugged the USB device into his laptop, and waited 30 seconds while the little light blinked. The LED went from solid red to blinking green to solid green, just like Mr. Delgado had shown me, and then I pulled it out and put it back in my pocket. I also found a stack of shredded documents in the bin that day, and I taped them back together that night. They showed a predatory loan Travis had taken out against the business 2 months earlier, using my forged signature as a personal guarantee. He had been planning to leave me holding the debt for a business he had already sold. The loan was for $240,000 at 22% interest, with a default notice already in the file. The lender had sent a demand letter to my name, to my old address, and Travis had hidden it under a pile of junk mail in the garage. A week after that, I staged a medical scare. I had been practicing in the bathroom mirror, slow breathing, pale face, a little wobble in my knees. I even used a trick from my bus driving days, hyperventilating lightly to make my lips tingle and my hands shake. One evening, while Travis and Brittany were in the kitchen arguing about a credit card bill, I clutched my chest and collapsed on the tile floor. I made my voice thin and said, "Call 911, I think it's my heart." Travis looked down at me. Then he stepped over my body to grab a document from the counter. He said, "Not now, I need this signature." Brittany looked at me on the floor and said, "Get up, you're fine." Neither one of them called for help. I lay there for a full minute, counting the grout lines in the tile, feeling the cold from the floor soak into my hip. I remembered Travis at 8 years old, riding his bike on my driveway, and now he had stepped over me like a bag of trash. That image replaced every birthday card, every Thanksgiving toast. Then I got up, brushed off my pants, and walked to my room. I sat on the bed and I did not cry. I just felt the last warm thread of family loyalty snap inside my chest, clean and quiet, like a belt breaking on an old bus. I called Mr. Delgado the next morning and told him the laptop was done and the test was done. He told me to be ready. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. The bank had frozen the Bright Path account after the suspicious activity report, and the competitor who had bought the contracts had received a notice that the sale was void due to fraud. Travis and Brittany were cornered. They came to my room on a Friday morning with a new set of documents and a blazer they wanted me to wear. Travis said, "Auntie, we need you to come to the bank with us. There's a problem with Mom's trust, and they need you to sign a release so we can access the funds. It's just a formality. We'll take you to lunch after." I saw the panic in his eyes, the way his fingers tapped on his thigh. Brittany was wearing a new designer scarf and carrying a folder that looked thick enough to hide a gun. I said, "Okay, honey, let me get my shoes." I put on the blazer, and I slipped my phone into my pocket with the recording app already running. I also put a small digital recorder in my other pocket, a backup from my bus driving days with fresh batteries. I did not tell them. At the bank, the branch manager led us to a conference room with a long table and 4 chairs. Mr. Delgado was already there, along with 2 detectives in plain clothes. One of them had a folder and a pair of handcuffs on his belt. Travis slid a document across the table, a release of trustee powers and a new power of attorney for the business. He put a pen in my hand and said, "Just sign here and here." I looked at the pen and I looked at him. Then I set the pen down and said, "No, I'm not signing away my mother's protection, and I'm not signing away mine." Travis's face went white. He said, "Sign it, Auntie, or I'll make your life a living hell." I said, "You already did, honey, but the difference is I kept the receipts." Mr. Delgado stood up and said, "That's enough." The detectives stood up and moved toward Travis and Brittany. Travis grabbed for the documents, but one of the detectives put a hand on his wrist. Mr. Delgado opened the folder and laid out the evidence on the table. He said, "We have a voicemail, forged signatures, bank records, and a USB drive full of documents. We also have a loan application with a forged personal guarantee. You are under arrest for wire fraud, forgery, identity theft, elder financial abuse, and money laundering." Travis shouted, "You can't prove anything. She's just a bus driver." Mr. Delgado pressed a button on a small speaker, and Travis's own voice filled the room, the same pocket dial voicemail, the one where he called me an old bat and said the word placebo like he had invented it. Travis's mouth opened and closed. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured tire. The detective read him his rights, and the other detective did the same for Brittany. The branch manager blocked the door. The trust's dead man provision had done its job. The assets were frozen, the forged sale was voided, and the money trail led straight to them. I sat there and watched my nephew put his face in his hands. I did not feel satisfaction. I felt something quieter, the way you feel when a lock finally turns after years of being stuck. After that, everything moved through the legal system with the slow grind of a belt sander. Brittany took a plea deal and received 18 months in county jail for forgery and tax fraud. She served 9 months and was released on a supervised work program, but she now has a felony record and cannot work in bookkeeping or banking again. Travis went to trial, and the jury convicted him in under 2 hours. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in state prison, but suspended most of it on the condition that he complete 10 years of probation and pay full restitution of $560,000. He spent 11 months in county lockup awaiting trial, and the judge credited that time. But the minute he misses a payment or violates probation, he goes back to finish the sentence. He also received a 10-year judgment in civil court, and the judge ordered wage garnishment at 65% of any income he earned for the rest of his probation. The judge also ordered him to attend a financial crimes class and write a formal letter of apology to me. He has not written it. I do not need it. The local paper ran a front-page story titled, "Retired Bus Driver's Nephew Convicted in $500,000 Fraud Scheme." My mother's house came to me through the trust, and I turned her living room into the business office, with the cedar recipe box on the desk as a reminder. I reclaimed the pressure washing rigs, the striping equipment, and the client list. I renamed the business Washout of Deceit Pressure Cleaning. I hired back the 2 crew members who had been let go when Travis sold the route, and I renegotiated the commercial contracts with the clients directly. The competitor who had bought the route was forced to return the contracts because the sale was void, but I offered him a fair subcontract on 2 small lots to keep the peace. The frozen wire proceeds were eventually returned to the business account after the bank's legal team untangled the shell company in Belize. I used that money to pay off the predatory loan, buy a new surface cleaner, and set up a small scholarship for school bus drivers who want to start their own businesses. I still honor the lifetime free driveway ceiling for the widowed women on my old bus route, and I do it myself every spring with my own 2 hands. And Travis scrubs dumpster pads. After his conviction, his probation officer was not fond of him, and the court approved me as a work release employer. He comes to work 4 days a week, from 6 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. He wears a full-body wetsuit, the kind you wear in cold water, with the words "Striped My Pension" printed across the back and across the chest in reflective yellow letters. I bought the wetsuit specifically for him. He scrubs the grease and the waste behind restaurants with a hot water pressure washer and a degreaser, and every invoice he generates includes the civil fraud docket number and a line item for restitution. The invoice header reads "Washout of Deceit Pressure Cleaning," and under the line item it says, "Amount applied to court-ordered restitution, $0. 00 remaining balance $427,000. His paychecks are garnished at 65% before they reach his pocket. He is very good at scrubbing now, which is ironic because he never once picked up a pressure wand when the business was ours. I do not let him near the striping equipment. He lost the right to stripe anything the day he sold my route. Every time he complains about the smell, I remind him that a $3,800 check for soap should have been the first clue that his math was wrong. My mother's warning was right. She saw the rot in him before I did, and she left me a shield I did not know I needed. I learned that family does not get to rob you blind just because you share DNA, and that trust is not inherited. It is earned. You can love someone and still lock the filing cabinet. You can grieve someone and still read the fine print. And you can be a 54-year-old retired school bus driver and still outsmart 2 people who thought they were smarter than you because you spent 27 years watching children in a rearview mirror and learning exactly when someone is about to lie. I also learned that a paper trail will outlive a lie. My mother knew that. My husband knew that. And now Travis knows it too. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? If you believe that a paper trail can save your life and your pension, hit like and subscribe. I keep telling stories about people who learn to read the fine print the hard way, and I will see you in the next one.